Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times. Hello, and welcome back to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. We are sadly one man down this week, but I'm here with Tom, and we are ready to talk about fintech. So Tom, how's your week been? How are you doing?
It's been very good. We're continuing our theme of as soon as we get someone back, I mean, you weren't here last week, someone else goes missing, then we have a couple of weeks of not having the full team together. But yeah, it's been a very good week, and I feel like I say it every single podcast, but it's been such a busy news week. We've had so much news in, and it's just been a lot to cover. Now, how have you been? How's your week been?
Yeah, I've been really good, thank you. Yeah, it's like you say, everything's just really ramping up at the moment, which is great. But then I think also like that change of seasons is definitely like, I don't know, we're definitely into the sort of fourth quarter now, or third quarter. Is it the third quarter? I can never remember. We're in a new quarter, and new things are changing, things are happening. But anyway, what are you going to be talking about this week? What's your story?
Well, yeah, as I said, it's been a very busy week, and that's mainly because, like you said, it's been a change of season, but we've had so many new reports and findings from surveys. We've officially ended, I guess, survey season, but that made it really difficult to pin one down. But seeing as we're missing Francis, I've picked one that he covered, which is all about an uptick in fraudulent AI-enabled insurance claims.
I love that. That's very sentimental. I love that for Francis. And then mine this week is all about investing in female founders. So I am going to let you go first, sort of, just because. So why don't you just take it away?
Sure thing. So this article basically covers a recent survey by Censuswide in which it spoke to 200 insurance claims handlers as part of a recent Sprout.ai study to ask them how many cases they thought were fraudulent or manipulated by AI. And it basically found that 94% suspected that at least 5% of claims were fraudulent, while 64% suspect AI was used in between 5 to 10% of cases. And shockingly, just shy of 1 in 5, 19% suggested that a quarter of cases consisted of altered documents using AI. Now, according to the findings, the cost of living crisis has just really ensured a rise in fraud rates. And pairing this with the availability of AI tools for the everyday consumer has really seemed to exacerbate the issue. The report says that 65% of the claims handlers surveyed said they've seen an increase in fraudulent claims since the cost of living crisis started in 2021. And 20% of these said they've seen a significant increase in this period. So when I was initially reading the article, I was intrigued, how is this type of fraud happening? And basically what it is because because of the high cost even of manually reviewing each and every claim an insurance firm receives, some insurers now auto-approve claims that are below a certain threshold. And the survey suggests that fraudsters have gotten onto this fact, and now 93% of the 200 UK claims handlers surveyed believes fraudsters are focused on smaller value claims worth less than £2,000, with claims valued at £501 to £1,000, the most likely to use AI-generated or altered images, maps, medical reports, or valuation certificates. So I just thought this was a really interesting topic. It's something that we cover a lot in terms of AI. I feel like we speak about it in some way every single week, and we're always talking about the rise of fraud and how we can combat fraud. And one of the main ways that we always say, we can combat fraud by using this new AI technique or AI cybersecurity platform or system. And this time it's just another example of how the tables have turned, and fraudsters are using AI to get a quick claim out of insurance companies. So really, Polly, I just wanted to get your take on this. What did you think about it? What stood out to you, and what do you think is the best way to kind of stamp out this type of especially small value but AI enabled fraud?
Yeah, this was a really interesting story, like you say, because I think normally we see how AI is helping fight against fraud. So I think it was really interesting to see it used, in the other way to be, to do the fraud. I think insurance is such a very interesting industry when it comes to like technology. So I wonder if, traditionally it can be traditionally it can be a very traditional industry in that it's quite slow to keep up with some of the technological advancements when we think about, the traditional insurance industry. So I wonder if that is maybe causing some issues in a way that's leading people to be able to take advantage of some of their more clunky back end systems, perhaps. But I think what I would actually be really interested in is knowing sort of the motive behind the fraud. And I guess that's not necessarily something that you can find out, I suppose. You can't really do the research into that, but it'd be really interesting to know whether this is like, your typical fraudster hacker trying to just like cheat the system and get money and do bad things in that way, or is this sort of as a result of more the cost of living crisis and rising costs? Is this just sort of like are regular people committing this fraud to try and just get a little bit of money because they don't really have anything else to do? And I know obviously that doesn't excuse it in any way, like fraud is still bad, but I'd just be really interested to know kind of the motives behind it and kind of understand what the problem is that the industry is dealing with here. Like, is this sort of a big targeted thing of just fraudsters being fraudsters, or is there another motive here? And I think if there is another motive of the cost of living crisis and the economic situation is causing people to be really desperate, then maybe there's something there that we can do to help combat fraud in the long term so that people don't feel like they have to commit insurance fraud in order to get a little bit of money. So I guess that's more of a socio-economic kind of a situation to look into. But I think that would be really interesting if that was something that we could find out, because I think as well, when you think about the use of AI is very much kind of in the public sphere now. I don't think it was in the same way it is now. If you go back maybe a year, 2 years, we still, obviously AI was around, but I don't think the general person knew that much about it, knew how to use it. But now it is very prevalent, so it'd be quite easy for just your average layperson to use AI in a way that they need to. But I think it's a really interesting situation, and one that I'm not quite sure how one I'm not quite sure how to sort of suggest maybe some solutions. But I think it's safe to say that fraud is something that's being impacted in every industry, and I think insurance is just another one of those having to deal with it. And it's really interesting to see the shoe on the other foot when it comes to AI and using AI in that way. So it's really interesting. I wonder if some technological advancements, or like kind of looking into things that way. I guess the idea of auto approving, that's kind of again come back to bite you in the bum a little bit, even though it's a great solution and a great way to sort of speed things up. Auto approving claims that aren't necessarily legit, you can see why that's an issue. But then if you got rid of that, then you'd be back to your problems initially. So I don't think there is one cut and dry answer to how do you solve the fraud issue within insurance. But I think it's just a really interesting thing to see, I think, and how creative fraudsters are being. You know what I mean? I think that's, again, it sounds like I'm admiring people who like do fraud, and I'm not, but I think they're so creative in what they do, and I feel like as soon as you come in with one solution, they're figuring out how to combat it, and they've thought of the next big thing. So yeah, it's the world of fraud is just crazy, and I think it's really interesting to see how it's affecting insurance, but I'm not quite sure how you're gonna fix it.
I think you've raised some really good points there, and it reminds me of, I mean, this month we've been focusing on reg tech and regulation and compliance, and that kind of obviously within that it's involved with how do you stop fraud in the best way to remain compliant. And a lot of people have basically been saying that every time you think I've got all the solutions and I've got a really good kind of platform that stops all different types of fraudsters just come up with a new way to exploit the new system that I've just introduced. And it's just a never-ending cycle really of fraudsters finding new ways to exploit systems or to get around certain anti-fraud measures, and it is really interesting to see. And it's almost like it doesn't feel like there'll ever be an end where anyone ever has we've got a platform here that you cannot exploit in any way, fraudsters can't get any money out of us. We're going to be forever in this endless cycle of just switching back and forth. Now, I mean, one of the points in the article came from Roy Amir, who's the CEO of Sprout.ai, and he was basically saying that the way that insurers need to regain control of this is by fighting AI with AI, and how powerful data processing tools, which is enabled by generative AI, can detect fraud, by comparing the claims against a database of imagery documentation and existing claims data, so it can flag irregularities. And I thought that was really interesting, but it's just another case of, okay, well, they're using AI to exploit our system. We'll use AI to combat that. And then it's just going to be, well, what comes next? It's just kind of, it always feels like the fraudsters are one step ahead and the industry is just having to react. And I think that's just another case there. But yeah, I really like some of the points you raised, especially about the sort of socioeconomic potential. And it'd be really interesting to see, like you said, I don't know how you would actually find out, but some kind of research into what is causing the uptick in that, especially, you know, when it's driven by the cost of living crisis. You think it is being driven by people who almost feel in some ways pushed to try and exploit systems to, you know, try and survive or whatever the reason may be. And yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what the findings of that would be, or whether it is just a case of fraudsters have AI now. They're like, how can we use it in every way? And yeah, so I think that's a really good point. But I think we've wrapped that up very nicely. And I know you've got a very interesting article coming up. So why don't we switch over to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. So my article today is all about investing in women code. Hang on, I'll start that again. My article today is all about investing in sort of female founders and investing in women code. So essentially, the UK's Department for Business and Trade has revealed that venture capital fund managers who have signed up to the government's Investing in Women Code program are more likely to invest in female founders. So just under a third of all venture capital deals made by Investing in Women Code signatories were female founded companies last year, compared to the market average of 28%. So the findings from the latest Investing in Women Code report means that this is the fourth year in a row that Investing in Women Code signatories have outperformed the wider market. So I just thought this was a really interesting one to bring up, and especially I think when it comes to sort of like women in fintech and women in the venture capital industry, because that's always something that we're thinking about and talking about here at the Fintech Times. So basically, Investing in Women Code aims to support female entrepreneurship in the UK by improving female founders' access to tools, resources, and finance from the financial services sector, which was founded in 2019. And basically, as we know, the lack of funding is one of the biggest barriers when it comes to women effectively scaling a business and just kind of generally being founders and running a business in general. It's almost always the lack of funding. And so this is kind of here to help combat that. So the Investing in Women co-partners include people like the British Business Bank, the British Private Equity, Venture Capital Association, and UK Business Angels Association, UK Finance, and things like that. And essentially it is working to provide equal access to finance to boost the potential of female-founded businesses and support the government's priority to grow the economy. 250 organisations have signed up, and showing that, you know, more lenders and investors are really committed to increasing the levels of finance directed towards women-led businesses. And I just thought this would be a really interesting one to discuss, because obviously we know, as I said, lack of funding and finance options is like literally the main barrier when it comes to female founders and female trying to start a business. So I think it's really interesting to see a program like this that is really actually, you know, boots on the ground, trying to help people to come up with that, and, you know, backing the government, figuring out actually, yes, we need to help these women found the businesses. Here's an easier way to get a bit of funding and to really sort of boost that. And I guess I wanted to kind of get your thoughts, Tom, in terms of what you thought about, you know, programs like this. I think there's, you know, very similar ones kind of in other places as well, and how these signatories are really attracting an increased level of female founders into their pipeline and actually sort of really boosting them up in a real legitimate way. So, I mean, what do you think about this in general? I've got a few things I still yet want to ask you, but just as a starting point, what do you think about this whole thing and this kind of program?
I think you've, like you said, it's a really important type of program, and similar ones that do exist. You know, you can't really say anything bad about them. They're really trying to tackle what is a huge gap, you know, just in the industry between, you know, male and female founders. And I think it just kind of highlights the fact that that gap does exist. I mean, despite the fact that this code has already gone quite a long way in seeing better outcomes and providing female founders with slightly better access to finance and really drawing more investment towards them, it's still a case of the investment gap is absolutely huge, and there's still a long way to go. And I just think obviously it's a really good thing, but it's something that is going to need to have an impact, and similar initiatives are going to need to have an impact for a huge amount of time in order to close that gap. And obviously that's very unfortunate, but I think that is the unfortunate truth of the moment, especially in the industry. And it's I mean, it's obviously a fantastic initiative. I really like what they're doing. I really am pleased to see that they're having success. But yeah, I think my first initial reaction is that there's just such a long way to go, and hopefully they can really increase their sort of positive output to close that gap.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that was essentially what I was wanted to touch on, is that, despite having a really good positive impact, like you say, there's still such a huge gap when it comes to gender investment. And, the strains on the market, it's just still not quite working. Like, things are better and things are improving, but are they improving fast enough? So yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing that you bring up, and I'm really glad you brought it up, because I think I don't think one, program like this is going to solve anything. I think it's really great, like you say, there's not really a lot of bad things you could say about it. And it's great to see someone working and doing things and, being in their 4th year now and actually out there making a positive difference. But I wonder if there's, more that can be done here, I guess. But then that goes down to the question, sort of, what more? Like, do we need to be looking to the government to try and help boost in that way? Do we need more programs like this to really help boost things? It's a really tricky situation, and one that I think we see time and time again when we talk about sort of fintech and investment and boosting women just in general, that, it is just a difficult environment to be out there. But I think it's really important to have things like this, to remain, I guess, in women's corners, you know what I mean? Like, having someone there that you can hopefully rely on as a female founder if you wanted to go and start your business or scale your business. You've got this program here to, keep you optimistic and try and actually increase engagement and get support, I guess, from the beginning of your journey. So I think it's a really interesting thing to see, and I'd love to see this sort of expand, because, there's so many barriers in access to finance for women. It would be great to see, investing in women codes just completely and utterly turn the whole thing on its head. And there's no reason why it couldn't do that. It's still a very early on in its journey. So yeah, but I think you're absolutely right. There's still so much to be done in the industry, and I wonder if, it's ever going to be done in anytime soon. But I think that's the same with anything like that, right? It's just a difficult thing to try and quantify.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the points that we see really often, not just in this scenario, but just other press releases we get in and other news stories that we cover, is the fact that diversity in teams has such a huge impact. I mean, if your team is diverse, in this case, it's the sort of angel investors teams, if they're more diverse, if they have a better ratio of males to females, or, whatever the situation may be, then that group will inevitably seemingly have better outcomes. And it's a case of, it's seeing more all-female angel investors, which means that they are naturally just investing in more female founders. And I think it just goes to show that the power of diversity and inclusivity in teams can have, and just the fact having females in these kind of teams that perhaps traditionally had far less females, that's having a huge impact as well. And yeah, I just think it just goes to show that these types of initiatives can really help sort of indirectly that as well. And I don't know, like you said, I think it's just a really good initiative, and hopefully they can have a huge impact, and it'll be interesting to see how they're able to do that in the future. And it's one of those difficult ones where when you think about what else can be done, and it's actually really difficult to think of genuine sort of ideas that could change the landscape, because it's such a huge sort of deep rooted issue. It's not just a case of, we can just implement this rule and everyone will be solved. It's really difficult to find someone that's going to have an impact, but also going to have an impact long term and kind of change the outlook. So yeah, I'd also be a little bit interested to see, what is causing, even to this day, this kind of disparity. Is it the case of, we just have too many male dominated investment teams that perhaps not even on purpose, but subconsciously are more drawn to male founded businesses? It'd be interesting to know what the cases are for that. And perhaps it's another case of, this kind of what is the motivation behind it, and how could we kind of understand that motivation to change the game as well. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic, and there's so many different routes that we could go down to talk about it. But to sum it up, I think it's a really good initiative, and like I said, I hope we just see more news, more positive news coming from the code.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've summed that up really nicely. There's nothing really I can add there other than, like you say, it is just a really great thing to see. And you just hope that it will inspire other, other people to sort of take action in a similar way, whether that's from a government perspective, whether that's from, a investor perspective, or just a business perspective in general. You hope you see more people taking the initiative to actually do something, like take some sort of action in this way. So hopefully we'll see that improve as we go along. But that does bring us to the end of our discussion. So thank you so much, Tom, for bringing an article and speaking about fintech with me. As always, if you want to hear anything about anything we've talked about today or anything else from the fintech world, head on over to thefintechtimes.com, where we've got plenty more news and insights over there. But very quickly, we will go on to what I learned this week. So each week, we are learning so much new news and information being on the Fintech Times editorial team that we thought it'd be fun to share that with our listeners. So Tom, what have you learned this week?
Well, this week there was actually another study that kind of caught my eye. And it was Finova's recent study about lenders and how basically consumers are kind of frustrated with the tech options that lenders are giving them. But one of the points in the study that really stood out to me was the fact that there's a considerable 42% of respondents still believe that speaking on the phone is the most effective method to address queries about their mortgage, which really just shows the value that people put on the, quote unquote human touch, despite the fact that they're actually really wanting new digital tools.
That's really interesting. Love that. And then what I learned this week is that Crypto.com has secured full approval from the Central Bank of Bahrain to operate as a payment service provider within the kingdom. And I just thought it was really interesting to see Crypto.com expanding even more. But anyway, Tom, thank you so much for joining me again. It's been sad not to have Francis here, but hopefully next week we will have the whole gang back together, fingers crossed. But as always, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk about fintech with you, and I will catch you on the next one.
Looking forward to it. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using hashtag TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.